Well, hello peeps, we're continuing the series where I show you how to get your elite transmog by reaching 1800 in the Soul Shuffle. As usual, I will walk you through all the necessary steps and some unnecessary ones that you can take to accomplish this goal. This time we have the Red Paladin. First things first, you want to farm your honor gear. It's time to pop the cherry and hit the BGs. If you got bloody tokens, get some world PvP items. Do save some tokens for Trophy of Strife items. Then do as much PvP weekly quests for that first bit of conquest and Trophies of Strife for your first epic pieces. I do want to note that you can buy Trophies of Strife for honor, but it's a pretty bad transfer overall, and at this point you should be mainly looking for conquest pieces. Unfortunately, you will have to send some ranked queues, since at this point in the season most people are going to be geared. Now that we got acquisition out of the way, I will shotgun you with the rest of the info. Mastery overall, but some haste is good. Crafted items I went for PvP boots and shoulders dream crafted embellish. For the tier set there is a discussion to be had. Most people agree that it's not worth it on red, but quite a few people are still running it, including me. More on that in the talent build section. I do want to note that realistically you need a few conquest pieces since we are deep into the season, enchants, single crafted item to start some soul shuffle queues. You will especially need items if you played last season and already have a built up MMR, since people past 1400 are fully geared. Talents. So, first thing I want to talk about is actually the foreset versus not having the foreset. This will ultimately be your decision. Most people these days agree that the foreset is not worth it. It adjusts your, how would you say, it makes your rotation a little bit clunky while not giving as much benefit as the 2-set or 4-set of other classes, right? So definitely is gonna be a choice for you. Many people, including me, ran the 4-set and, you know, were probably able to get their goals and reach their goals by having the 4-set, so it's ultimately it will depend on your choices. The 4-set will give you a little bit more, I'd say, maybe DPS, while running just conquest gear will give you more instantaneous burst damage and also make you a little bit tankier overall with just having higher versatility. Moving on to the damage side of the talents, Retribution points. This is just the cookie cutter build that I would run. As usual, I recommend you go and check out every point and why are we taking it, why, you know, which points we are not taking. Of course, as per duration, if you're not running the 4-set, you could just move this around, something like this. Vanguard's momentum is pretty good. I don't know, I don't think I would move it anywhere else, but you could also still just run it as well. Imperial Legacy, but I just personally like Blade of Vengeance more these days than just for the constant cleave damage, right? So even if I was gonna run the conquest gear, right, without this 4-set, I would still be running something like this, personally. Now, if you're gonna run Final Reckoning, I would suggest you remove one of these talents. Maybe even like if you have a slow on your team, a good slow, maybe in Judgment of Justice, but like I would remove one of these talents to get Executioner's Will, or even look to remove a Truth's Wake, right? Now, why running Executioner's Will is good with Final Reckoning, it just, I feel like it gives you an extended option of like swapping targets and doing, how would I say, you feel like it just benefits Final Reckoning a lot more. It also would actually, like, how would you say, it actually makes your burst less when you're running Execution Sentence, since your Execution Sentence will hit later, right? So for me, definitely, if I'm not running Execution Sentence, I'm not gonna be also, how do you say, if I'm running Final Reckoning, I'm running Executioner Will. If I'm running Execution Sentence, I'm not running Executioner's Will for sure. Moving on to the Paladin points, there is really just one point of optimization that I do. Sometimes Holy Aegis into Cavalier or Seasoned Warhorse. Otherwise, there is literally nothing. Actually, this, you can do something like this as well. But like, really, there's no other optimizations that I would ever try and do on this side. I feel like everything is almost like maximally optimized for how currently we are playing, right? So yeah, just use this and then move this if you're like playing versus like mages or whatever, and like you can also move Devotion Aura, yeah, but like, yeah, that is pretty much it. I would not, like, generally speaking, like, this is not gonna give you too much value of like trying to optimize it, other than like you're playing versus like a full caster comp, and like having armor and some crit chance is not gonna be as good as having like 2 steeds, right? Moving on to the PvP talents. Now, of course, Aura of Reckoning, your main DPS PvP talent, you're almost always gonna be running this. Whenever your team has been critted a lot, you're gonna get things very simple. Blessing of Sanctuary, this is what makes Red Paladin in PvP, you know, Red Paladin in PvP, in my opinion. It's like your main tool, right? The main utility that your class has that other classes don't have. Learn to use it, macro it. I definitely suggest you macro it, but yeah, not much to say. Get your team out of stuns, get your team out of CC, yeah. Now let's get over the rest. Searing Glare, really good option if you're not going to be focused. Unfortunately, in this season, this is not the case most of the time, and I just feel like it's a little bit of risky sometimes to try and use it, right? You can get kicked, and like getting kicked on Holy can be really bad for you, so I just personally do not like using it anymore. Blessing of Spell Warding, almost always running this anytime there's like an additional, like, or how would I say, a very dangerous mage class, even like only one, like even doesn't matter if it's like how do you say, mixed team. If there's like a dangerous mage class that can like 0 to 100 to 0 people, you want to have Blessing of Spell Warding, not just for yourself but also for your team. Spreading the word, I would say this talent is not good right now, especially like, yeah, kind of, I feel like magic damage is more stronger than physical damage as well, so I just feel like overall this talent is like meh right currently. Hollow Ground, you could actually use this sometimes to just have more freedom on your team, but I just feel like I'm very rarely thinking this is like a better option than something like Judgments of the Pure, which lets you cleanse a disease, poison or magical effect on you with casting Judgment on a target, which I think this is like really strong. Anytime there's like a class that you want to constantly be dispelling, even for rogues it's really good, even for Death Knights it's amazing. Like, it doesn't really matter, like in any of these like effects that you want to be constantly dispelling, and elemental shamans, this is like can be a really strong talent. Where it can be problematic is of course if there's a class with an actual like scary backlash, right, like Affliction Warlocks, then yeah, of course don't use it. Shadow Priests, of course, don't use it. So Lawbringer, I would actually recommend you start using these when you're playing with like against Warlocks and like maybe Death Knights. I feel like it actually has like it deals more damage than it did like last season, of course, because we have more HP, but it just like the value of it is a lot higher than it was before. Overall, I still feel like it's a little bit how do I say, not as good as it was, you know, originally. So just sometimes you will gonna take it if you're like playing versus DK Warlock. Ultimate Retribution is just, you know, Ultimate Retribution, not running this in arena. Luminescence, again, one of your main, how do you say, like if you're not running Blessing of Spell Warden, not running Lawbringer, right? You're gonna run Luminescence before you run Lawbringer, but in general, like if you're not running another utility or defensive PvP talent, you can go for damage. And I think Luminescence is just, how do you say, passively just very good. You know, 2% does not sound like too much, but you know that Blizzard does buffs and nerfs in 3%, so it's actually huge when you think about the fact that your team is buffed by 6% if it's all your entire team, and it's both heals and damage. So now we come to the most important part in my opinion, which is training yourself for PvP. The basics of it being your burst and sustained rotations. You want to train these by going to my best friend, the target dummy. It might sound silly, but the most important thing is to have your damage come out without thinking so you can focus on the game. We'll start off with the base priority, spend Holy Power, Blade of Justice, Hammer of Wrath, Judgment. Of course, spending Holy Power on Templar's Verdict if you're doing damage. There is some finesse now with alternating judgments to have the judgment damage bonus on Holy Power spenders. But overall, it is very similar to last season, just less focus on Hammer of Wrath. The 30-second minute burst rotation is quite simple. Have some Holy Power, Stun, Templar's Verdict, Execution Sentence, Templar's Verdict, Wake of Ashes, Templar's Verdict into Sustain. Now, of course, if you're running Final Reckoning, just skip over the Execution Sentence part. Moving on to the 1 minute burst rotation, have some Holy Power, Stun, Execution Sentence or Final Reckoning, Divine Toll, Templar's Verdict, Wake of Ashes, Templar's Verdict into Sustain rotation. You can add a Templar's Verdict between Execution Sentence or Final Reckoning and Divine Toll to maximize on Holy Power, and if you're just doing DPS, do it that way. But it is more bursty to try and skip it, especially if you're running the Final Reckoning build. Now we come to your full burst with the Crusade. You first want to stack up your Crusade. Try to have some Holy Power before you pop it, since this will help you if you get CC'd and such. After you get 10 stacks, choose a target and unleash your 1 minute burst. Now we come to the tips and tricks section. It might sound familiar to my returning viewers, but it needs to be mentioned. First and most important tip is to use your utility. That is what makes a Red Paladin in PvP, if you ask me. Blessing of Sanctuary is actually one of the most powerful PvP abilities. It can remove undispellable CC, and you're basically only DPS that gets to get others from CC. Make sure you're using Blessing of Freedom on somebody if you can, to have it on 2 targets. As a DH main, to me this feels quite refreshing, that I'm able to impact my team a lot more often and help them out more than just one big 5-minute cooldown. Of course, this is where we have to mention macros. Since I'm running double DPS Trinket, I do have my own use bound to the Final Reckoning or Execution Sentence. Final Reckoning Cursor Cast macro to make it faster. I use party macros for Sanctuary and Sacrifice, but you can do all your blessings, or none at all if you're willing to get good at targeting your team. Ultimately, this will depend on how you choose to target your team, but it's an important choice to make. While I would usually give you a long speech on how to look at your defensives, this season Red is not blessed with tankiness. Your 1-minute cooldowns are a bait and you want to stop damage from 2 classes, sometimes not even from 1. So basically log what classes burst you can survive with it and what classes burst you have to bubble or kite. Most of the time you will have to bubble or kite. Be careful with Blessing of Sacrifice in Cleave even more than before. Try to line up your burst with your teammate's CC. With a Crusade build, I would say it takes some finesse now, but it's all about getting to 10 stacks as soon as possible. Since Paladins don't have an MS effect and you're not guaranteed to have pressure, so it's good practice to get used to using your burst combined with CC. Learn what classes kill you and which can tank you. Healers like Druids and Preservation Evokers you can swap on solo easily and burst them down, unless they have one of their immunity style abilities or trinkets. Other healers like Disco Priests are quite good at countering your damage on the go. Ladder classes in general you can pop in and stun quite easily. Of course this will take some time and experience, but it's actually quite an easy thing to note which classes you feel like you're murdering and which ones are murdering you. And that is for part 1, peeps. For part 2 I have some nice things planned, so be on the lookout for that. I do have a recent solo shuffle video on the Red Paladin that most have not seen probably. So for gameplay commentary and my general thoughts on the Red after the changes to the trinket set bonus, you can watch that, link in the description, and you will probably have a screen pop up. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all those things that YouTubers want you to do, and have a nice day.